I was diagnosed with combined type ADHD. So most of you probably know this already, but ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but it can come as both internal or external hyperactivity, inattentiveness, so like inability to focus, or because I drew the short straw, both. And, it's kind of, this is just stuff that's kind of impacted me a lot. So it's kind of a bit small on here. I should maybe zoom in a bit. If it'll let me with that. No. Oh, Google Slides. I should have just used PowerPoint, right? The only time you ever choose Microsoft products over anything else. But yeah, so I'm Luce Carter. Although I'm not here in my official capacity by day, I am a developer advocate at MongoDB. I'm also a Microsoft MVP, so basically I just do my job twice. One full-time job being paid and one full-time job not being paid, but getting a cool trophy. And I guess I make some cool friends along the way. But yeah, so kind of today I just want to share with you some of the techniques I've learned along the way to just help me manage my time and information. It's sort of helped me a little bit of my ADHD, but obviously this is stuff that I've learned long before I even knew I had it. But hopefully it will help. And some of you may have ADHD, some of you may not. Some of you may struggle to focus. Some of you may know people who struggle to focus. Or maybe you're a boss who just wants to make your teams more effective. Hopefully there's some bits in here for you. So the first technique I actually want to talk to you about is how to store all that information that might be in your head. So we're going to talk about note-taking. Well, I went from knowing half my audience to them now walking out the door, so that's cool. Was it something I said? So yeah, the first thing I want to talk about is note-taking. So have you ever had those magic moments in life where you're like, oh wow, the light bulb goes off and it's like, oh. I remember one example would be when I read the Java for Dummies textbook when I was much, much younger than I am now with much less grey hair. And it talked about what a class is and described it as a blueprint. And I'd struggled to understand classes and objects and all of that stuff before then. But then I read this thing and it talked about blueprints and buildings. And I was like, oh, I get it. So one of the magic moments that happened for me was when I saw this quote. It says, a brain is for having ideas, not for storing them. Does anyone know where that quote comes from? No? Oh, wow. OK, so this comes from David Allen's book, Getting Things Done. And it's essentially it gets referred to a little bit in the productivity YouTuber space as the Bible. And getting things done is more of a methodology than like anything specific around information. And it's literally for managing your whole life. But the quote really resonated with me because I was like, wait, that makes so much sense. Your brain isn't for storing information. Like, whoa. So information that's of interest, including things that we think of, we should be storing them somewhere that isn't up here in our heads. And as someone with ADHD, I honestly lose count of the number of times that I forget something a few seconds later. It might come back to me later, but that isn't always the case. So I always just feel a little bit safer, like a warm hug, knowing that if I actually store the information somewhere, it's there for later. If I remember to note the information down. Because let's be honest, most of our ideas are had when we're walking around and we can't, talking into our watch going, Siri, take a note, makes us look like weirdos. But having a place to store the information that you want or need just gives you more time to think about other things, right? You're not thinking, oh, I need to remember this, or you're not sat there going over the same thing over and over and over again. Because one of the things that David Allen also says in his book is that if you're not happy with how you're storing your information or you're getting the ideas out there in a system that you trust, your brain won't let it go. So the only way to give yourself a break from overthinking about things that you could just write down is just to make the time to actually note it down. But how do we actually go about note-taking? What is one way you can take notes? Now, this obviously is very subjective. I've met people that like bullet journaling. I've met people that just like, walking down the street, talking into an Apple Watch, taking a speech-to-text note. But for me, I like Para, or PRRA, from Tiago Forte, who is an entrepreneur and productivity expert. And he's coined this concept called second brain. He's done podcasts about it, YouTube videos, he does courses. He released a book earlier this year. And so I really like this. I'm just going to break it down into what the I'm just going to call it Para because it's easier to say than trying to say PARA. So projects is something with an outcome. So it'll have anything with 2 or more steps that has an outcome and a deadline. And that's really important. That deadline could be self-imposed. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, self-imposed deadlines don't work. My brain just laughs in my face and goes, "Ha, you are a something. This is not a real deadline. Who cares? No one's waiting for you." But if it does work for you, it is good to have a self-imposed deadline, and that is kind of one of the definitions of projects. But then projects have notes associated with them. So then you're starting to associate, notes with projects. And then if you've got this project you're working on, it's like, oh, I've got notes I can reference for this. Then we've got areas. So they're an ongoing sphere of interest. So, anything that you want to, anything that's kind of interest, it might be, it has a standard to be kept over time, but it isn't necessarily a project with a specific outcome or deadline. So it could be things like finances, health, productivity, I guess. That it's just anything with a standard, and it has an area will have a project. So you're starting to see a link between them all. For example, I have an ADHD coach every now and then, and my ADHD coach is a project because I normally have things to do, like things to try that she suggested to me, but it comes under the area of health. Or for personal finances, I've maybe got things where I've got a financial advisor and it's things I need to gather up. Or it's just things like, hey, have a meal plan, you idiot, because otherwise you forget to eat or you eat like crap. Then resources. So this is just supporting documents, images, videos, diagrams. You can even be super fancy and draw a diagram and then take a virtual image of it and store it. But the idea is that resources is where that would go. And of course, it can fall under a specific theme of interest. It might have a project, it might not. I've got my own sort of mini Pinterest because I get way carried away with interior design, and I'm like, oh, look, that's a nice paint color, or I like that furniture. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to try that out. And that's just really important to me. I'm like, let's just have something that we can reference. And then there's archives. So archives is just, as you can imagine, anything from those other categories that you're not using anymore. But the thing to bear in mind is that things in the archive can be archived, they can be unarchived at any time. They're not, you keep it rather than just deleting it and it disappearing into the ether forever. It's just important to have something in your archive that you can reference later, because it might be that 3 months down the line you actually need it and it's like, oh, I kind of like that, I'm going to use that. So my recommendation is, if you can, if you don't need something at that moment in time, archive it, because you just never know when it might be useful. So this is the first of the fun memes that I promised Maddie was in this talk. So just imagine you have a new project. So for example, I had this talk I wanted to put together because I've had lots of people talk to me about the impact of, even after the pandemic and when we got used to working from home, as things went back to normal more, actually things that used to be fine before the pandemic are actually impacting them now, and they're not as productive as they used to be. So I ended up in all these conversations with people where I was sharing different things that I've learned or I find interesting. And I was like, oh, I could just make a talk out of this. But one of the things you want to do with a talk, right, is you want to reference things that you've read, heard, or seen. And yes, that includes TikTok. I don't use TikTok, but TikTok is a valid form of information source these days, I think. Maybe take some of the things you see with a pinch of salt. But yeah, you might be super excited and passionate about the topic like I am with productivity. I am no way an expert, I am no way productive, but I pretend and I try. But yeah, if it's all in your head, you might start to get a little bit overwhelmed with it. And so, you want to have something that's going to help. So just imagine feeling in control of all this information that you've got, knowing it's stored in just one single place that you know where to find it. That might be an individual notebooks that you break down into projects, that you can then easily reference later, whether that's a digital search or a physical search. And that's what I did for this talk today. All I did was just go into some of the interesting areas that I've got in my tool that we'll come on to later, and just find things that I wanted to share. And I like the power approach because by using this concept of storing things digitally, it just gives me a place where I can store everything, and it's super interesting. I consider it like the ultimate fancy digital filing cabinet. I've always wanted like a real life filing cabinet, but IKEA didn't sell the inserts for the drawers I bought, and if it doesn't come from IKEA, it's not going in my house. But the main thing is that you store information. As I mentioned at the start about note-taking, it really is subjective. How you store information is entirely up to you. I just recommend that you start doing it in a way that works for you, whether that's a digital filing system, whether that's bullet journaling, whether that's just doodles on a piece of paper, just whatever works for you. Because if you can reduce the friction to feeling productive, it'll make your life easier. It's the same as if you want to stop using TikTok and Facebook and Twitter and stuff all day when you're supposed to be working, stick them on a separate page on your phone that you have to spend longer scrolling to than the things that you actually should be using. So hands up, who here thinks they can implement something like note-taking, right? Yeah, and I'm sure there's plenty of people here. So Maddie, for example, is a PM, and I just think they're the most organized people I know. It's probably a peek behind the curtain and I'll be disappointed, but...
Oh yeah, it's called spinning plates.
Oh yeah, well see, I'm dyspraxic, so I drop the plates.
Yeah, yep.
But yeah, you know, it's pretty straightforward. It's just about starting somewhere with taking down all the notes that you want to keep. But then you kind of, you know, you have this talk you want to put together, or you have this project that you want to work on, but you don't go from zero to, you know, project, end result, hero, you know, being lifted up by your teammates going, yay, you're the best, and whatever the correct American sports analogy would be, I don't know. But yeah, you don't go just like that, right? You have to have actions that you take. And as I mentioned earlier, a project is anything with 2 or more steps. And that's where, you know, the second technique will come in, right? It will help you actually make progress on these ideas that you have. And that technique is the daily highlight. So I was contemplating putting books as a technique in this talk, but then I realized that actually it's a foundation to everything I kind of talk about. So it doesn't get its own technique. But one of the productivity books that's had a huge impact on me is Make Time by Jake Knapp and John Zaratsky. And in that book, they talk about finding a daily highlight. And they said that the first thing that we learned was that something magic happens when you start the day with one high priority goal. And it seems fairly straightforward, right? You know, we'll come on to what it is in a minute, but for example, my favorite win of the day is to make the bed. I'm British, there's no comforter in my life. I just pull the duvet over and like nice and simple. So, you know, I start the day by making the bed, and it means that every time I walk in my bedroom, like if I'm taking a break and I want to do laundry or I want to put laundry away, I walk in my room, the bed is made, and it just looks nice, and it's like, oh, you know, I make the bed. I'm the kind of person who's got their stuff together. You know, it's just giving yourself that vibe of like, I know what I'm doing in life. So yeah, one of my favorite wins to start the day is to make the bed. But what exactly is a daily highlight? Well, it's a 60 to 90 minute goal that you pick based on the order of urgency, satisfaction, and joy. 60 minutes is enough time to get you into the zone, whereas 90 minutes after that, you start to maybe get a little bit mentally tired. So 60 to 90 minutes is just a nice little target. But why urgency, satisfaction, and joy? You know, they seem like really strange criteria to decide a highlight on, right? Well, urgency, of course, is deadlines. If you're supposed to give a talk in an hour, you should probably prioritize working on that. You know, deadlines are important. You need to make sure that you actually hit the things that you promised. But then maybe you don't have anything urgent on your plate. Well, then just pick something that's going to, you know, be satisfying. Something that just feels good to get done. It might be, you know, getting your talk done a week early. Any of us that are speakers in here will know that you qualify as a goddamn professional speaker when your slides get done the day before you go live. Like, thankfully this talk I've had prep for longer than that, but that was why I did it, because it was satisfying to get this talk done early and be like, yeah, I've got my stuff together. This talk was done early. I like it. But maybe you don't have anything that you need to get done that's just not urgent but satisfying. And that's where joy comes in. Something that's just nice to do because you have a choice. Going to watch the football because they'll win all the time because the Patriots are the best. We don't talk about yesterday. That's what I learned yesterday, my first ever football game. Or just something else relaxing if you're not into sport. So it might be just giving yourself 60 to 90 minutes to read a book. You know, how often do we actually find the time to just switch off and read a book? Probably not often enough. Or if you haven't got anything that's just going to take 60 to 90 minutes, just batch a load of smaller things together. Do admin, reply to those emails, you know, read your Twitter DMs, all those things that need doing. Just bring together all the little things into one 60 to 90 minute thing that you can just get lots done in that time. You can even break it down into, smaller bits, just do a group of things here and a group of things there. The main thing is just give yourself that something to do. And the reason we do that is because it gives your day direction. It gives you confidence that you're going to get at least one win that day and you're going to get done what you said you're going to get done because you've given yourself the highlight of this is what I want to get done today. So who else thinks they can do something as simple as find a highlight to achieve every day? Yeah, simple, right? And that's what I love about these things, is that when you actually break it down, they're super simple to do quickly. But then once you have an idea of what you actually want to do, you need to make sure you find the time for it, because time is a weird concept. It follows the same pattern every day, but boy, does it impact our lives differently every day. But one technique that really helped me, and again, this is subjective, but for me personally, is time blocking. So I've tried doing Pomodoro. So that's 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. By default, it's based off the Spanish word for tomato, I think. Yeah. But as I said, it just didn't work for me. I couldn't focus for that long. 25 minutes when you've got ADHD, that medication doesn't work. 25 minutes is a long time. It's not a long time when you're watching YouTube or Netflix, apparently, but it's a long time when you've got important things to do. So I like time blocking because it gives you the power to be as granular as you like, to set things you want to do each day. And you can decide yourself how long the block is. Is it 5 minutes, 15, 20? More than 20, you might prefer Pomodoro, but it's entirely up to you. And of course, you can adapt the blocks to be the length that works for the task that you're doing. And it genuinely can be as little as 5 minutes, like some of my blocks. So don't worry too much about what this says, but anything in purple is things that aren't meetings, they're just what I'm choosing to do with my day. So I literally plan my day from 9 a.m. up until it stops after 1 p.m. No, 3 p.m. Apparently my day goes from 9 till 3. Who knew? But yeah, you can do this, you can plan it however you want. It's just about what works for you. And, you can be as explicit as you want. Be the boss of your own time. Be like, yeah, I am blocking that out. No one is making me listen to that whiny customer. No one is making me attend that meeting without an agenda. Block out some time. Make sure that you put in time for your daily highlight, because then it's going to get done. No one can book meetings. No one can drag you away because it's like, hey, look at my calendar. I'm busy right now. I can't deal with your thing. And that's great. But one of the things I would recommend you make sure you do is block out lunch and breaks. Your day time blocking doesn't mean that you're booking your time from 9 a.m. until Americans work weird hours. So what's like 10 hours after 9? It'd be like 7 p.m. Something like that. I know it sounds like such a stereotype, but honestly, I've worked with so many Americans and you all work such long hours. Like, I'm very impressed, but I'm also very sympathetic and a bit pitiful. But yeah, the idea is just, block some time out. Make sure you put in breaks. You don't have to work on something heavy, after each task. Take 5 minutes, put the laundry on, go for a walk. Spend a few minutes writing down things you're grateful for to bring a bit of joy back in your life. Just make sure that you put breaks in. And you can decide what you fill your time up with based on the daily highlight, but also any other things you want to get done. Almost do a sort of sub-daily highlight of, other things you need to fill out based on urgency, satisfaction, and joy. But of course, that does lead to fairly frequent context switches. If you're the kind of person that's like, oh no, I can't work on something for 20 minutes and then change, it will drive me crazy, block out longer. You are, like I said, you are the boss of your own time. Do what works for you. I'm just sharing, this is what my calendar looks like. I can be a bit granular about things, but you can be as chill as you like. But one of the things you've got to do is just make sure that nothing else can get in the way. And that's why you do time blocking. As I said, you don't want people to be coming in asking you to do things. You want to be reassured that you've got the time in your calendar to achieve your daily highlight, or just get things done or whatever matters to you. And like I said, it's important to do breaks. So everyone else can, everyone here, right, can be explicit with their time. We can all just go, hey, I want breaks and I want time in my calendar. It's awesome. But I want to take a minute to discuss something else. So this is one of my favorites, delegation. Now, you might be sat there like me and going, I'm new in my career, or I'm an individual contributor. I don't have any direct reports. Who the hell do I delegate to? I don't have minions. But actually, you'd be surprised. All it takes is a slight mindset shift. I can never say that. I'm going to stand in front of the mirror later going, mindset shift, mindset shift, mindset shift. For someone who literally used to Twitch stream marbles because I can do commentary like a auctioneer at those like Storage Wars TV shows, like I wish I could like say mindset shift. But yeah, the trick is just to decide, things that you don't enjoy doing or don't want to do. Then kind of taking a mental guide of what do you think your hourly rate is roughly. It can be based on your salary, or it can just be based on a realistic view of what you think you're worth. And if you can outsource a job for less than that, do it. My house isn't particularly big. In the UK, all the houses are tiny. And I still pay a cleaner every week because they change my bed sheets for me so I don't have to. And they clean the house because I've got better things to do. I'm writing a book. I'm giving talks everywhere. I'm sending the Maui team hype messages because people complain at them a lot and they're the best. There's lots of things I want to do with my time that do not involve the cleaning. Don't get me wrong, I wipe the, countertops when I've done the washing up and all that stuff. I'm not like a slob, but all the boring things I just outsource to someone else. And this was actually a technique I learned from a YouTuber who, as their YouTube channel started to take off, they were getting more and more emails and messages from people that they just didn't have the time to look at. And so they just hired an assistant for a couple of hours a week to just take that off their plate and go, okay, these are the things that we can just delete because they're just scammy people trying to get you to advertise something really lame, or it could be something important that you need to see. But the idea is just to realize that you are worth delegating. If it's a job you don't like and you can afford to outsource it, and there is someone to outsource it to, do it. Yeah, and as I said, I outsource cleaning, but you maybe outsource laundry. It's not so much a thing in the UK. I think it's quite common in the US to go to dry cleaners. Like, if you can just send the work to someone else, do it. And, you can outsource these things as frequently or infrequently as you like. It's just about going, I just don't want to do that. So we've got our calendar blocked out. We've decided what we want to block our calendar out for, all the things we want to work on. And, it might sound extravagant to outsource these things, but, if it's worth less than your hourly rate, you'd be surprised. Sometimes you can get more money back, either physical money or just emotional, the value of getting it back emotionally is just worth that outsourcing that money. So it's just something to consider. But one of the things we want to do now, right, is we've decided what we want to do and we've blocked out time for it and we've gone, yeah, I'm going to delegate this to someone else. How do we actually decide what the right things are that we work on and when? And this is, and what the right length of time is in our time blocking. And this is where the weekly review comes in. As you'd expect, the weekly review is just where you look back at the week that's just gone, but you actually look at the week ahead as well. We're all very good at retros and all those things where we look backwards, but sometimes it's useful to look forwards as well. You want to ask yourself things like, were my goals for the week realistic? Is there anything I could have learned from how the week went? What went well? It's always nice to reflect on the positive things, right? It's not always just about giving ourselves a self-review where we're just really critical. Be kind to yourselves. Just go, I did a great job this week. I made somebody laugh or something. Yeah, and also, did you allocate the correct size blocks for everything that you need to do? Did I allocate the right amount of time and effort to these things? Because, you're not going to get it right first time. I remember before I started outsourcing the cleaning and getting someone else to change my bed for me weekly, because being dyspraxic, trying to do things with bed sheets, I just end up, not joking, there has been occasions where I'm not afraid to admit I've pretty much just had autistic meltdowns and my friends have had to come and just help me change the bed sheets. So yeah, me and changing the bed have an interesting history. I like the clean sheets afterwards, but not the experience of getting there. But, one of the things I learned before I got the cleaner was that I was allocating, say, 5 minutes in my time blocking to change the bed. It doesn't take me 5 minutes. It takes me 5 minutes if I get it right first time, but it normally takes me about 15 because it's inside out or it's done the wrong way because I have a king-size bed, so it's not a square. So if you do it the wrong way, you have to take it out and do it. It's a nightmare. It's honestly just so much PTSD. But this is also impacted by a well-known phenomenon, Parkinson's law, and there's probably quite a few people in here who know good old Parkinson's law. Work expands to fill the time allotted to it. So one of the things you want to do is just be aware of making sure that you're allocating the right time, because if you give yourself way more time than you need, it's like, oh, I've done this early, sweet, I'm free for a while. Where's TikTok? That's what the cool kids do, I think. I'm not cool, so I don't use TikTok. But, as well as looking back, you want to look ahead. You want to check, what are the next actions on my to-do list? What are the things that I need to do next, and what may be daily highlights for some of my days next week? What can I do to help move it forward? That might be chasing up with somebody who you're waiting on to move something forward. You might just be saying, hey, this hasn't moved on for a couple of weeks. Is there anything I can do to help you? Or it might be going, oh, okay, well, actually, this deadline is in like a couple of weeks. Maybe I should actually start to make progress on it. Or, like I said, what deadlines are approaching. So, as I said, a brain is for having ideas, not for storing them. You want to feel more in control of what you're working on. If it's hard, you'll stay awake. If it's in hand, sorry, I don't know if it's not hard. I can't English today. Like lots of people, I got dragged out of bed at 5:30 when I was finally beaten jet lag to go and stand in the street in my pajamas, which is not a look I ever expected with people I barely know. Like, hey, I'm probably going to see you in future because we're on the speaking circuit, but hey, here's me in my PJ shorts and my MVP hoodie. Why not? But yeah, once you have it in hand, as I said, you won't stay awake worrying. As we touched on at the beginning, your brain is for having ideas, not for storing them. So if you're making sure that this stuff is out there and it's planned out, you'll feel a little bit more in control. So who else thinks they can just spend a few minutes every week just doing a quick review and looking back and ahead, right? Nice and simple. Well, we've talked about a few techniques about how you feel in control of things a little bit more. But what do we actually use to do all this? Like, what can we do to put some of this in action? So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about tooling. And not the kind that some people in this room get paid to deal with. This is a different kind of tooling. Like I said, some of this stuff requires recording information. So what are the options when it comes to actually storing this stuff? Well, if you go onto something like YouTube, for example, and type in productivity apps, you will see a very long list of different videos where people are discussing all these different productivity apps. And a lot of them, actually, the content will be very similar. It's just a different delivery style or a slightly different list of apps. So I'm not suggesting that all of these need to be watched, but it just gives you the idea that it's quite overwhelming and that there's quite a lot of choice out there. And so sometimes it's just nice if someone just takes your hand, just goes over, maybe skip or go for a walk or whatever you want, or in my case, ride an e-scooter because I'm cool. Oh no, wait, I already said I'm not cool, so I can't make that claim. Never mind. I'm cool in my head sometimes. So my personal favorite is Notion. Who here's heard of Notion? Who here uses Notion? Sweet, yeah, Notion friends. So for those of you that don't know, Notion is a project management and note-taking application, basically. I think that's what their website says. I don't know. I don't work for their marketing. But it's essentially a glorified database, and not the kind for the company I work for, but it is really a database under the hood, because it gives you the ability to create pages, which are essentially databases, so you can store the information, you can query information within the page or across pages, you can add views to see the different bits of information in different ways. It's awesome. You can even add filters for that, you can look at the same page but just have different filters depending on what you want to look at the time. And you can even create relations between the pages and the properties. I mean, I know, relations, get out, get back to, but relations can be matter. And I use Notion to manage my whole life, both personal and professional. Welcome, my friends, to my Notion life management dashboard. The font is tiny, we will go through the actual bits in a minute, but literally I have stuff everywhere. Don't know if I use it well, but I try, and I normally pretend that I use it well. So the first bit is projects, and so this is projects by status. So we've got everything split down into the areas they're under. So we've got things like MongoDB, so they're work things. We've got SEO, because one of the things I do most at work is I work on a content team where we create content where we're doing it based on what developers and our users are searching for on Google, because, sorry, search engines, Bing's a thing. But yeah, essentially, it's about search engine optimization. We're very developer focused at MongoDB, and so a lot of the work that we do is around what you're searching for. So SEO is the whole initiative. So SEO has its own area. I, of course, have public speaking and other things that I've got going on, like learning, where I'm taking notes on things, or events I've got coming up. We've got health or ADHD coaching. The idea is that I have areas for things in my life, and if I think something doesn't fall under an area, I create an area for it. But this specific view, you can't see it because the picture's, again, is quite small in this projector, but it's split into views across the top. So I've got things like to do, so I've not started them yet. Ongoing, so I've already started them. On hold, because it might be that I can't do anything with it yet. So why have it there making me feel guilty and shamed that I'm not working on it when it's not being done right now? And that's one of the concepts that actually comes from Dave Lamb's Getting Things Done. This idea of putting things on hold, or waiting for, I think he calls it. Then we've got areas. So these are the things I mentioned. We've even got things like healthy eating, learning, live streaming, because I used to stream on Twitch. Now I stream to YouTube for the MongoDB channel because we always promote YouTube, so why put things on Twitch? But that's a whole other conversation. And then we've got other options, right? So Notion is my thing. And there might be people here as well who are fans of Notion, but it can be a little bit overwhelming. A lot of the time you can come into Notion and you've got this blank template or blank slate to start from, and you're like, oh my God, I don't understand. Like, I've seen these cool things, but what? Now, of course, Notion does come with templates, so you can actually ride on the shoulder of giants, whatever that phrase is. So you can actually find free or paid templates where other people have done the work for you. So I'm not going to take the credit for my life management system. It's based on something called Ultimate Second Brain by a guy called Thomas Frank, and I paid $50 for it. But it was worth it. Actually, I'm a equivalent of a Patreon supporter for him now, so I had office hours with him. So that's kind of cool, being able to thank him for although he's the one that told me about B&H Photo in Manhattan, and so I ended up spending $2,000 on a fancy camera. But still, yeah, it's cool. But yeah, even still, even with templates and everything, you might find that Notion is just a little bit much for you, or maybe you don't want everything in one place. You prefer to pick the right tool for the job. So what are some of the other options? Being asthmatic sucks. So the first one is Obsidian. So this is a markdown note-taking app. And a lot of people move to Obsidian because of some of the security features. But the thing with Obsidian is that it's local markdown files. So if you like markdown, great. But if you're like me, where you want to take notes or create a project or update something on the move because my brain never switches off. Like, I have to watch things to fall asleep. Like, my brain does not understand what doing nothing feels like. So I can't have things in just one place because I need to be able to get to them from anywhere. But if you're not like that and you prefer Markdown and you don't feel the need to, update a project in Notion while you're sat on the bus or whatever transport you take, you might quite like Obsidian. Then there's Evernote. Evernote is another popular note-taking tool where you can split things into notebooks, so you can do it based on what projects you're working on. Then we've got Todoist and good on Microsoft To Do. So if you prefer just to have tick boxes and nothing too complex, these to-do lists are great because you get that dopamine hit of ticking it off or crossing it out or whatever these apps do. I think To Do is a ticking off and it disappears. But yeah, if you just like the satisfaction, you can do checklists in Notion. So it's, you wouldn't just use these for the tick boxes. But if you just prefer to have simple to-do lists, then Todoist or To Do is your friend. But there's some other sort of slightly different kinds of tools I want to talk to you about. The first one is Readwise. So Readwise is a highlighting app, but what's cool about it is it can sync from multiple places, including Kindle. So if you're the kind of person that reading, either fiction or non-fiction books on your Kindle, and you're like, oh, that's quite interesting, and you take a highlight, Kindle can actually import that highlight for you automatically and output it to wherever you set. So in my case, Notion. So, hey, look. I have a Notion page for the books that I've read, and each of these is broken down so there's books, articles, tweets, podcasts, so it's not just Kindle. I've just used Kindle as a good example. You can then go into the books and read some of the highlights that I've made. So some of these are not fiction books, so they're just funny things that I've read. Some of them, of course, like Make Time and Getting Things Done, and even Deep Work by Cal Newport, are really good productivity books. So they're a good place to take highlights. But another one I want to mention is Instapaper. And the reason for that is because it allows you to highlight things. You can save things to read for later, and then inside their dashboard, you can read the same article that you've saved for later, then make highlights. And guess what? Readwise will grab those highlights for you and stick them in wherever you like, in my case, Notion. So I can start reading interesting articles and learning things and pretending that I spend all my time learning all this new and cool technology. I try, but I do a terrible job. But, you know, it's cool to know that if you just have this digital information gathering online, you've got a nice place to put it. Now, there's another technique I want to mention. It's sort of a tool, which is why I put it under this area, but I've saved it till last because it's one of my favorites, and that is body doubling. You might know this as co-working. So it's a common technique where you just have someone beside you, basically, you know, being your body double as you get work done. Might be someone to talk to. It might be someone doing the same thing as you. You know, or you might be, you know, it could be completely unrelated, or it could be someone working towards the same project or goal as you. You just work together. I don't know if there's any kind of psychological phenomenon behind it, but from my understanding, it's just having someone near you who can help sort of with accountability, and that maybe it kind of shames you into like, oh, I'm not doing any work. It's like, I had the pleasure of being in the Microsoft office with Maddie on Thursday, and I actually got something done that had taken me bloody weeks, just because someone had no idea that I was doing anything, I was just there, and it was nice. So thanks, Maddie, I got something done thanks to you. But yeah, as I said, it's just about accountability and just having someone around. You know, it doesn't have to be in person. It might just be, you know, it could be in person. It could be just having someone to keep you company while you're doing the housework, or doing a spring clean, or Marie Kondoing all your belongings. Or it might just be a Zoom call or a Discord. So I'm a mod for a really great Discord community for a friend of mine who's a Twitch partner. And one of the channels we have is Focus Co-working. As and when you like, you can just drop in the channel. There's no microphones, it's just on mute. You just have the camera on and you just get on with work. No one can really see what you're doing, but weirdly it just works and we get stuff done. I think it's because you can't leave your desk, so you get to that point of like, well, I'm at my desk and people can see if I leave, I might as well just do something useful. YouTube can wait till later. So as I mentioned before, you know, you want to have this sense of trust that nothing will possibly get useful will get lost. And you'll have this freedom to have many more good ideas. I don't know whether I'm a better human being since I started using Notion to manage my life and take notes. I'll ask my friends that have known me long enough to know that I was and maybe still am a chaotic mess. I'm not sure. Who knows? I feel like a chaotic mess, but that's a whole other thing for me and my therapist to talk about. So today we've talked about 6 techniques that you can use to feel more in control. You know, try it. It's all about seeing what works for you. I'm not suggesting that these are a miracle cure. I'm not suggesting that all of them will work for you, but just try it. Because just imagine your life, right, in a few days or weeks from now, feeling more in control and feeling like you can trust your systems to achieve more in life. As I said, these are just methods to help. You know, it does still require self-discipline. Taking notes, unless you take the notes, are not going to be any use to you. Having a daily highlight isn't going to be helpful if you don't take the time to set one or stick to it. So when you leave here, just try putting these into action straight away. Just take one simple thing and just try it, whether it's taking some notes or finding someone to work with. You know, we're at a conference, right? We can always just go hang out in some nerdy room somewhere and get some work done. Just be together or just find something and enjoy your journey of feeling more productive. Thank you.